Welcome, weirdos. We are back. We have had a hiatus for about a year and some change. We do apologize for kind of running out of the bill on this one. We had to, come up with a different game plan. Anyway, we are here today with, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Dillon Hutchins. I'm a paramedic student, hockey player, amateur rapper. Yeah.
All right. So I guess today we're just gonna, interview Dillon, and I'd probably want to focus mostly on the neuroscience.
Sure.
Okay. So just to tie in the hockey with everything, if any kind of fight breaks out on the ice, does anybody look to you like, okay, man, you're the ER here?
So, in those instances, most hockey teams, they have their own their own trainers. So they have their own docs that go around with them, and they help them out for most of their injuries. The EMTs and paramedics inside the arena, they're there only for serious injuries.
Oh, wow.
Like if the player, for instance, a couple times in NHL history, a player has gotten their throat cut by ice skate. Yeah, and they're there, they're squirting blood out onto the ice, and I mean, these guys are tough. They freaking just slap their hand over their neck and they skate off the ice. But so the EMTs and paramedics are there for those kinds of injuries where these guys have to go to the hospital, or if they get knocked out and they don't get up.
Right. So you're basically on borrowed time because you're losing blood pressure with every heartbeat, right?
Oh yeah, especially with when the neck gets cut, those are under high pressure.
Right.
So blood's going to come out of them quick. Plus they're extremely important because they're going to the brain. So those, you 100% want to get them to definitive care quickly.
Okay. All I can think of is the scene in Death Note whenever Mika cuts his throat and just this spray of blood comes out.
Honestly, in reality, can be like that.
Really?
You'll have people lying down in the stretcher in the back of the ambulance, and some artery is cut, and you let off pressure on it, and it goes and it hits the ceiling.
Oh. Do you have to clean that?
Of course.
So you have to sterilize the whole
whole thing, yeah. So
what if you get a call while you're in the middle of sterilizing?
Then you go to it depends on what kind of sterilizing you're doing. If you had a guy who was extremely sick, had a really contagious disease, then what you do, you just go what's called out of service.
Okay.
And so the whole EMS system, they'll give you time to decontaminate the back of the ambulance, and then you go back into service.
I see a lot of those Capital Metro buses that are out of service. I wonder if someone just had violent vomit and they get...
Honestly, yeah. I mean, that'd be a good reason to put them out of service. I don't want to ride on a bus that's got vomit dripping from the ceilings.
Oh, Jesus, that'd be terrible. Personally, what's the worst thing you've seen on the ice?
On the ice?
Yeah.
While I'm working, or just in general, ever?
Have you had to go to a hockey team?
Yeah, I've worked hockey games before.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And nothing's happened. It's so extremely rare.
Right.
And most of those guys are so tough that they'll break a leg and skate off on it. Yeah.
Jeez.
So I haven't seen anything too bad working at a hockey game.
How about on call?
Yeah, I mean, you see bad stuff. I'm still pretty new to the field, so the worst I've seen was this guy. It's called a GI bleed, gastrointestinal.
Mm-hmm. And
so you're bleeding somewhere along your system, anywhere between your mouth and your anus.
Wow, that's a lot to cover.
Yeah. So I mean, it can get pretty nasty.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a certain smell to it that you just know that someone's got a GI bleed as soon as you smell it.
There's a cut in their body, or it comes out of their mouth, or something?
You could call it a cut, but it's like an internal one. Cut's not really the word for it.
A puncture or a rupture or something?
It could be a rupture. This guy, he was a heavy smoker, and so odds are he had ulcers inside of his stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And he also, this guy's unlucky, he had this this disease, he was born with it. Myelodysplastic syndrome that's an umbrella term, and he had a specific one where he doesn't clot well.
Oh.
So he had an ulcer in his stomach that then started bleeding, and he had missed an appointment. He needed to go get some platelets. It's the thing that helps you clot. And he missed an appointment, so he didn't have any of that, and so his ulcer started bleeding and didn't stop bleeding.
Oh, Jesus.
And so, I know, it's nasty, because then what happens is the blood, it goes through the whole GI tract, and it gets digested, and then the guy, he shit himself,
right.
And it's what we call a dark tarry stool.
Yeah.
That's the color of it, and then the smell, as soon as we walked in, we're like, oh, okay, let's go.
I got you.
It's time to pack him up, and, yeah.
Yeah, I knew a guy in the Navy who he had an ulcer, and they had to cut, his stomach, and then they had to go in through his intestines, and they gave him like dissolvable, stitching.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, the one on the inside dissolved a lot faster than the one on the outside. So, like, it was rubbing as it started to break apart.
Yeah.
And it was like rubbing the inner lining of him, and like you could see he would double over, and you're like, "What's up?" And he's just like, "Oh, my insides are just fighting."
Oh my
Jesus,
God.
yeah.
Yeah. Or like what, your friend was talking about with the aneurysm. She had a sharp sudden sharp tearing pain in her abdomen, and that would freak me out if I'm treating her as my patient, because I'm like, oh shit, because that's possibly could be called the abdominal aortic aneurysm. And so the aorta is like the main artery of your whole body.
Okay.
That's the one that goes from the heart, kind of curves up around your left side, and then goes all the way down to the abdomen, and then every other artery branches off
right, fractals.
From the aorta.
Gotcha.
And so an aneurysm then is when the wall of any blood vessel kind of balloons outwards from excess pressure and reduced elasticity, because your arteries are elastic. They can go out and then back in, out and back in. And that's also how we can control blood pressure, is the constriction of these arteries. Well, and so what happens is it loses elasticity and it bubbles out. And then the problem with that is it makes it more prone to rupture. And the last thing you want is the main blood-carrying vessel in your body to pop open and spring a leak.
Right.
That's very bad. So, at the time of feeling the pain, it's not a huge deal, but you're really worried because it could rupture, and then they have very, very low survival rates of that rupturing. Yeah, so that's got to be looked at, taken care of soon.
Wow. Just to switch topics a little bit,
Sure.
The degree that you have, what exactly is the degree?
So I've got a bachelor's in human biology, and then with this program I could get an associate's with emergency medicine, but I kind of just want to get through the program as quick as I can, and the classes I would have to take would be like end-of-life studies, weight training. There are things that aren't necessarily crucial to being a paramedic.
Right.
So I'm not going to get the associates. I don't really care about the pieces of paper.
Yeah, the accolades.
Yeah, I just want the knowledge.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say is like the most interesting thing you learned in your schooling?
Most interesting thing I learned? That's hard. The one thing I learned that surprised me is how few calls to 911 people make, like when they call an ambulance, that are actual emergencies.
Oh, wow.
It seems, at least here in Austin, only about a quarter of the people who call 911 for an ambulance actually need an ambulance. The rest either don't even need to go to the hospital, or they do need to go get checked out at a hospital or at a primary care physician, but they or someone else can drive them.
Gotcha.
But they, people, you get scared. You call 911 and we're the ones to come in and, solve the issue right then and there. And so, we take... It's actually a big problem here in the States compared to, in London, like in the UK, they don't transport as many people. Like, it's about 30% of the calls that they get, they just leave the person there at their house. No, because they see them, they do the assessment, and they say, oh, okay, you don't need to go to an emergency room. Like, we know what's wrong with you. You don't have to go. Or here in the States, you've got the huge issue of being sued. So there's a whole cover your ass mentality. So you're like, I'm like 90% sure what's wrong with this person. But that slight 10%, or even 99% sure, but that slight percent that I could be wrong,
right?
That's I'm going to lose my license, I'm going to lose my job, lose all this money. And so we take people to the hospital who a lot of times don't need to go.
How much money does that cost versus, being left at your house to, riding with you guys?
Well, I mean, it's the United States, so healthcare is extremely expensive. Yeah. Ambulance is very expensive. It can cost thousands of dollars for like a 15-minute trip to the emergency room. Like, I just learned this recently. It completely shocked me. To check your blood sugar, right? Like the things you can pick up at Walgreens for $30, where you prick your finger and you just drip a little blood onto that test strip, and it shows you on the tiny little monitor to show you what your blood sugar is. It's for diabetics mostly. That costs $400. If you're on an ambulance, every time that they check your blood sugar, that costs $400.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's an expense. And the thing is, it's not they're trying to rip you off. It is expensive to run an EMS service.
Yeah.
Like the heart monitors. If you call 911 for chest pain, thinking you might be having a heart attack, and they go and we take those little sticky pads and we put them on people's chests.
Right.
And we pull it up on the monitor and get what's called a 12 lead. It's looking at the electrical activity of the heart. And those monitors, those are really expensive.
Is that an EKG?
Yeah, that's an EKG. It can do a lot more though.
Really?
Oh yeah, I mean those things, they can shock people. So we can defibrillate. We can do what's called cardioversion or pacing. Like when somebody has a pacemaker.
Right.
We can do that with the monitor just from the outside.
Wow.
Like external pacing.
Even if they don't have a pacemaker?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because a pacemaker, all it is just, it sends electrical shocks to the heart. It's just a thing that they go and they plant it on the heart. And it just sends little shocks to the heart so it pumps at the right beat.
Right.
The right rate.
A good metronome. Have you seen those sleeves that they're starting to put over hearts now?
The sleeves?
Yeah, it's like this clear sleeve that you can put, and it's like a bladder, and it actually squeezes your
heart. Squeezes the heart. Yeah, there are things called a left ventricular assist device. And it'll go right there. And it even has, in case the machine stops working, it has a little pump. And it's just this little pump, and you squeeze the pump, and it'll pump their heart and pump the blood around their entire system. Those are interesting because some of them, the person won't have a pulse. Because it's not a
right.
That's not how the machine works. It's just a continuous flow of blood. Because their heart's just not working at all. So this machine pumps the blood, but it doesn't do it in a beat-by-beat motion. It does it as a continuous stream. And so you'll feel for their pulse, and they're talking to you. They're walking around, and they've got no pulse.
Wow. Wait, so you've seen someone like that?
Yeah. Actually, this guy did have a pulse. He didn't have one of those. I saw a guy in the ER. He had, it's LVAD, left ventricular assist device, but he had a pulse. He had a different kind. But as far as costs, those monitors I was talking about, they can do all kinds of things, but they cost easily over $10,000 to buy them, not even to maintain them. And you think about Austin's got about 30 to 35 ambulances running at any given time.
Right.
So that's $300,000 right there. Is my math right? Yeah, $300,000 just for one piece of equipment. And it's not trucks, gasoline, holy crap.
Right.
Most expensive part though is training and just paying your EMTs and paramedics.
Do y'all's trucks use diesel or just regular gas?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
I would assume regular, just to make it easier on you guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, trucks that big, you'd think it could be diesel. It could be. It all depends on what kind of truck you're driving.
Do you guys have to fuel up at any location, or do you guys have a special location?
It depends. Some stations have their own gas.
Wow.
Some EMS stations, where we live basically for that 24-hour shift, have their own gas. So you can fuel up right there at the station.
That's cool.
But there's a book called 1,000 Naked Strangers, written by this guy who is a paramedic out in Atlanta. And he tells a story one time how they went to a gas station to fill up the ambulance full of gas, and then he went to use like for lack of a better word, the company credit card to pay for it. And for some reason the card wasn't working, and they didn't have money on them to pay for the gas themselves. So they just like drove off.
Oh wow.
With the gas somehow. And but yeah, you can fuel up anywhere, really.
That's good.
Yeah.
What do you guys normally do whenever you have downtime?
It all depends. I mean, if you work in Austin EMS, downtime is a relative term. Because they're so busy. You know, on average, you'll get 12 to 16 calls in a 24-hour period. And if you include, like, from when you leave the station to when you get back from that one call, they'll usually last 30 minutes to an hour. It's because you take them to the hospital, right? So you got to go to wherever the call takes you. You got to do a quick assessment, and so you're usually on there for at least 10 minutes, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. And you take them to the hospital, and depending on Austin traffic, it could be a 10, 15-minute drive. That could be a 30 to 45-minute drive, depending on which one you have to take them to.
Right.
And that's just to get there, then to get back. And so, one call would be an hour to 2 hours, and you get 12 of those in a 24-hour shift. You don't get much downtime. But when you do, you just kind of sit on the recliners they've got there, screw around on your phone, watch some football or TV. I was a student, so I studied a lot while I was there. Firefighters, they have it nice because they don't have to transport. They show up on scene because they go to medical calls too. Like 80% of their calls are medical as well.
Really?
Yeah, when you call 911 for an illness or injury, you're gonna get a fire truck and an ambulance at that call, like almost guaranteed.
Okay.
So the firefighters, they usually get there first because there's more fire stations and fire trucks than there are ambulances, and they're also not as busy. So you call 911 for being sick or hurt, odds are they're the closest fire station to you. Those guys aren't busy, so they show up. Whereas the closest ambulance to you, they're probably off doing something else, so they got to send someone who's a bit further away.
Okay. So
the fire truck shows up, and those guys are all EMT basics, which means they have basic medical training and knowledge. They'll take a few vital signs. The good ones really know how to do a thorough assessment. There's a whole stereotype in EMS that firefighters are incompetent when it comes to medical stuff, and there's a grain of truth to it. But there's plenty of firefighters out there that are great at medical assessments, and they take good they know which vital signs are the most important for that specific patient. So the fire truck shows up, they'll do a quick assessment, get some vital signs, and the ambulance shows up, and then care is transferred to the ambulance, and the firefighters, they're going to go back to the station.
Oh, okay.
They're going to go back to their workout, lift some weights, cook some food.
All right, eat some chili.
Yeah, exactly. So firefighting, it's a nice job, firefighting.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen the show Sirens? I think it was on TBS, maybe.
No, I try to avoid those 911 shows.
Okay. Well, it was more of a comedy.
Okay.
But that's the closest thing I got to seeing what you've done.
Seeing it?
Yeah.
I can't watch any medical related stuff on TV anymore just because of how many things that they get wrong.
Okay, so it's like me watching Top Gun. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like, Air Force guy watching Top Gun, or it'd be, honestly,
I gotta correct you. It's Navy, bud.
Navy? Yeah. Well, yeah, but Top Gun, oh, that was...
Yeah, Fallon, Nevada is where it's at now.
Oh, okay. I thought,
if I'm not mistaken... I don't want to guess the first one.
it would be like a guy in the Army playing Call of Duty. Like, it's just that far from the truth that it's really hard to watch.
Okay.
Yeah. You just see some mistakes that they make in there. And the most common mistake that you'll see in any medical drama at all is on the heart monitor when it's a flat line, and everyone's like, okay, get the defibrillator, we gotta shock him. They get the paddle, bzz, and they shock the guy on a flat line. You don't do that. That flat line, that's called asystole. You don't shock asystole. That doesn't get a shock, because So defibrillation, when you shock the heart, what's happening is the heart's sending out electrical activity in a way that it shouldn't be, in a way that's not sustainable with life. So that'd be like VTAC, VFib. Those are the only two you can shock. And so what you do is when you shock the heart, you're not restarting it, or you're not changing the rhythm. The shock, all it does is it completely stops all electrical activity in the heart. And so when you do that, your hope then is that the natural pacemaker of the heart will then take over again and start beating and sending electrical activity as it should. So that's all you're doing with the shock, is you're turning off the heart and saying, hey, stop, and then hoping that the heart will start on its own the right way. And so then in a flat line, there's already no electrical activity. Right? So there's no electrical activity, and the heart is not picking up its own, it's not starting its own beat. So shocking it, it's just going to keep them at a flat line. If anything, it's going to make them worse, because that's a lot of stress on the heart. So yeah, if you ever watch anything on a medical drama and someone's flatlining and they go to shock them, you're just making the person worse.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just go straight into compressions then?
Always. If somebody's heart stops, first thing you do is compressions.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Wow. When you talk about suing, you hear about those guys who break ribs and then they come back to life and then they sue the EMT who saved their life.
If you're breaking ribs in CPR, you're doing it right.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, because, you're physically compressing the heart with the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to push really far down. And most people you do CPR on, they're not young and healthy, because those people's hearts don't stop. It's usually the elderly people, and they've got frail bones. And so breaking their ribs, it sounds gruesome. It's not that hard to break their ribs. So
I feel like that would have a whole extra host of problems, man. You puncture a lung or something.
You could, but at the same time, if somebody's heart stops beating, a punctured lung is secondary.
Really?
To that, yeah. Well, think about it, because you need blood to your brain.
Right.
And so whether or not don't get me wrong, a punctured lung is very serious and can actually cause cardiac arrest. But if somebody's heart stopped, a punctured lung is not, as in worrying about a punctured lung isn't about as important as getting blood to the brain. Because you need that to survive.
Right.
But yeah, I actually wonder how I don't think it's very common to puncture a lung from CPR.
Okay, yeah, you'd have to be that right angle.
Yeah,
pushing down just right.
There'd have to be some weird things to happen, and I'm sure it has happened.
Yeah.
You never know.
Man. Yeah. I could be wrong here, but I think I've heard Dubai at one point wanted to use Ferraris for their ambulances. It would be one driver, and then they would transfer them, and they would just completely retrofit them.
That'd be cool.
That'd be pretty interesting.
Ferrari. I think if any company that makes luxury cars would make ambulances, it'd be Mercedes.
That's true.
Because you always see those Mercedes vans.
Yeah.
So you could deck out an ambulance with nice leather seats.
Right. I love that meme. It's when you tell her you drive a Mercedes, and it's just that shipping van. Man.
Yeah.
That's cool though. I know that they keep pushing for new technology, and I remember watching something from 2050 where a guy hypothetically fell off a roof, and I guess they proposed that they wanted to cryo freeze his entire bloodstream. That way you don't have to worry about the heart, and then you can just thaw him out when you get there. And I was like, what?
Well, yeah, being cold does weird things to the body. We talked about one time the stories of the kids who drowned in freezing cold water, and they were underwater for 40 minutes to an hour, and they brought them back fine.
Wow.
It's something about the extreme cold that allows... I've only ever heard the stories with kids. Allows these kids to survive without oxygen for an extremely long time.
Do you think it slows the metabolism technically, even though they're not alive, or?
It could be. I really have no idea. I would just be, talking out my ass.
Right. I wonder what like the gut, flora or whatever do whenever you're.
Maybe they probably die.
Yeah.
I don't think those bacteria can survive that kind of temperature. But so the cold, that's actually a thing that we do now once you bring somebody back from cardiac arrest, is called targeted temperature management. And so you actually cool off their body after cardiac arrest. So you'll put, you can put ice packs in their armpits and in their groin. You can give them chilled saline.
Oh, wow.
All right, so you set up an IV and you get that bag. It's basically just salt water, but they've got a little refrigerator in the back of an ambulance, and they keep that stuff in there, and it's cooled off. And so you want to reduce their core temperature, and they've found that it actually increases people's mental and cognitive abilities.
Cold saline?
After cardiac arrest. Yeah, just reducing their core temperature to a certain level.
Oh, okay.
After you get their heart starting, like their heart beating again.
I think I got cold saline once in the military. I don't remember what for, but it was like, it's just that one spot is so cold, man.
Well, okay, I mean, the thing is, like, if you think about it, you probably didn't get chilled.
Okay, probably just got regular saline.
You just think it's room temperature, right?
Yeah.
And your body's temperature is 98.6. Room temp is like 76.
That makes sense.
75. So it's going to feel cold. It's relative cold.
Right.
But this stuff is chilled at, I don't know, like 50 degrees.
Wow.
So it's cold.
That's really cold.
Yeah. But they found that people come back with better mental function.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So something about the cold and not getting blood to your brain. Or oxygen to your brain, really. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Just learning about the body, because for me, being an aircraft maintainer and definitely seeing how maintenance is done and knowing what it takes to keep an aircraft in the air, now you know how fragile the human body is. Are you just like paranoid now?
A lot of times, especially with driving.
Yeah.
Car crashes, when it comes to EMS, car crashes freak me out more than anything, just because of how violent they are and how dangerous it is for everybody involved. Because you're on a busy highway, people see an ambulance on the side of the road as like, one, it's an obstacle. It's something that's annoying because it's in their way. They're trying to get home or get to work. But then it draws everybody's attention.
Rubbernecking.
Yeah, and you tend to drift the way you're looking. And so you're on scene, and you're always running the risk of being hit by a car.
Jeez.
And then car crashes are so, like I said, they can be really violent, and we're so fragile that, like learning about EMS and doing some work in EMS has definitely made me a more cautious driver, because I've seen what can happen if you're not.
Right.
And then, like if I've got family members or friends that are sick with something, I start thinking about like, oh, it could be X, Y, and Z. Because we're taught in EMS, like if somebody presents with a sign or symptom, you think about the deadliest thing first. Like, what is the deadliest thing that would present with this sign and symptom? So if someone's got chest pain, we start with heart attack, pulmonary embolism, pericarditis, things like that. And then once we've ruled all of those out, then we'll go on to, well, maybe they've got like inflammation in their cartilage, in their ribs, costochondritis. Maybe it's musculoskeletal. Maybe it could be gastric reflux. That can actually cause chest pain and make people think they're having a heart attack. It's like acid reflux. But so then when I have friends and family that tell me some signs or symptoms, I kind of freak out at first. I'm like, oh, it could be this or that. Like I said, like your friend, when you said she had an instant, sudden, sharp pain in her abdomen, first thing that popped in my head was abdominal aortic aneurysm. And then you said aneurysm over the phone. I was like, yeah.
Okay, like I'm right.
Yeah.
Wow. So okay, let's say you arrive on scene and you have an unconscious woman who's pregnant.
Oh shit.
What do you do? Does the baby take? Yeah,
no. Mother's life is always the first thing you save.
Okay.
Then the baby. I mean, ideally both.
Right.
Right. But if you have to make a choice between the fetus or baby, depending on how far along it is in your political views or religious beliefs. Baby or mama, you're going to save mama first. That's just how it goes. So pregnant woman, unconscious. Where are we? Just at her house?
Sure,
just at a house. I mean, first thing you do is you go up and you try and talk to her like, hey, ma'am, I'm with EMS. What's going on? No response. So she's not responding to words. So the next thing you do is you check if she'll respond to pain. Because this is all levels of consciousness, right?
Okay.
We're not just hurting people because it's fun or funny to like... No, so you inflict some kind of minor pain. They'll teach us, like, you pinch their trapezius muscle between the shoulder and the neck.
The Vulcan nerve pinch?
Yeah, the Vulcan nerve, yeah, you do that with the opposite effect, right? You're hoping to wake them up instead of knock them out. And so then if they don't respond to pain, that means they're unresponsive.
Okay.
That's like no mental functioning at all right now at the current moment. So after you've done that level of responsiveness, you then go and check for their carotid pulse and their breathing. Because this is the first indicator. Let's make sure that their heart's working. So you check the carotid pulse, make sure they're breathing, and if both of those are present, you're like, okay, cool. At least we've got that. Then you go and you look in her airway, right, in their mouth. You do what's called head tilt chin lift, where you pull back the head and you lift them up at the chin, kind of like tick their head back, like
get a straight shot.
If you're looking at the clouds, yeah, and you look inside their mouth, make sure that there's no obstructions, any blood secretions, nothing that's blocking the airway. You want to make sure that's open. You want to make sure that they're breathing. You assess rate, rhythm, and quality of the breathing. So, like, are they breathing too fast, breathing too slow? Is it
shallow
really
breath?
shallow? Is it too deep? And then you go to circulation. So you'll check their pulse. That one, rate, rhythm, quality. You'll check their skin. Color, temperature, condition. That tells you a lot about how well blood's moving in the body.
Wow.
So yeah, you do those. Those are like your very basics. They teach you EMT basics. They all do that. That's like your bread and butter. If you can keep those three things, we call them the ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation. If you can keep those good and healthy, or if they aren't, then you're golden. The rest is kind of... I mean, the rest is still important, but those are the three main things you want to work on.
That's the 80-20 right there, right?
The 80-20?
Yeah, the, what is it, the 80% that you'll use is 20% of the information versus the, yeah. So.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's like that.
Tim Ferriss would scold me right now for not remembering that off the top of my head. Okay, so we covered unconscious. Now what about conscious people? What percentage would you say is in shock versus complete frenzy?
What do you mean?
Let's say you arrive on scene. How often is somebody just completely, vacant, distant? They let's say they lost a finger, but they're not freaking out over it. Versus, oh my God, I just lost a finger. You need to take me now.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not too many calls are true emergencies.
Okay.
And then the ones that are, people handle them completely different. I mean, you'll have somebody, like, it's an emergency, they need to go to the hospital, they've got, I love this phrase, they've got one foot in the grave and the other foot on a banana peel.
What is that?
So, I mean, the original term, they've got one foot in the grave, which means this person's about to die, right? Like, they're on the brink of death. They've got one foot in the grave, right? Then I heard somebody else, he said they've got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, which means they're about to die and just like the tiniest push and they whoop,
oh no,
slip in. You'll have people that are, they're having a true emergency, but they're cool as a cucumber. They don't care. They care, sure, but they're not phased. They're completely nonplussed. Then you'll have people who, breaking a bone can be pretty painful, but you'll have somebody and they're just completely overreacting. They're thinking it's way worse than it is. But that's completely okay, because, being sick is a scary thing. Being hurt is a scary thing. And some people just don't handle fear as, what's the word? they don't handle it as well as other people, as stoically as other people. Yeah, so really it's just a grab bag of who you get and how they react to whatever's causing them issues.
Okay. Let's say somebody like ODs on medication, but you guys don't know that. How quick would it take you to figure, to get to pumping the stomach? Like, what would you check for something like that when it's completely self?
So this is where your detective, EMS has a lot of detective work. Is something that I've learned. You really have to play Sherlock Holmes in a lot of situations. So if you show up, let's say somebody, like you said, OD'd on a medication. Well, so they're unconscious, they're on the ground, and first you do every life-saving thing you have to do, right? If they're not breathing well, you breathe for them, right? You've seen that with the bag valve mask, where they put a mask on somebody's face and they squeeze that big bag to breathe for them. You might have to do that. Hopefully you don't have to do CPR.
Are the lungs that easy to inflate and deflate, and they're that elastic to just have a little pump?
Oh, well, the pump's not little. That bag that you're squeezing to pump air, that's like the size of a football.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a little smaller.
Right.
The hard part is getting the mask to seal on their face. People who have a big beard, that can make it hard.
Would you have to shave someone?
I've never heard of people shaving the beard. I have heard of Vaseline. This is only in the OR, the operating room, because I don't think we carry Vaseline on an ambulance, but if you smear that on their beard, it helps you get a better mask seal. But so the detective work for the OD, right? So once you do your life-saving measures, then this is where it's nice having the firefighters on scene, because you have 4 extra pairs of hands to help you out. You can have them look around the room, look around the house. Hey, do you see any empty pill bottles? Any open containers? Maybe it's cleaning equipment. So that you do. Are there any bystanders there? Are they with a friend? Can you ask the friend, hey, what's going on? If the friend's kind of reluctant to tell you, oh, I don't know, we just passed out, and they look like drug addicts. They've got marks in their arms. Then you might think, okay, it could be heroin. And a heroin overdose, any type of opiate, that's actually really nice in terms of treatment, because we can take care of that right away.
How so?
There's a drug called Narcan, or naloxone is the generic name, and it just reverses all the effects of opioids.
Wow.
So I'm being very simple with it, but basically you put it in and it just knocks all the opioids out of your system.
Wow.
Yeah, so someone they'll overdose on heroin, they'll be passed out at the bus station, at the bus stop. They're not breathing. Because, heroin's kind of hey, everything's really nice. Right. Everything's really nice. Don't listen to that nagging voice in the back of your head telling you to breathe. Don't worry about it.
Oh, wow.
So they stop breathing. And so we show up.
That's like Alzheimer's.
And so we show up, and if we know that that's what's wrong with them, we just give them a little... There's different ways to administer it, but you give them this medication, and then almost instantly they'll start breathing again. If you give them too much, it'll bring them completely back to normal, sober consciousness, and they'll get pissed off at you because you just killed their high.
Oh, man. What if you gave it to just a normal person?
I don't think it would do anything.
Okay.
I don't think it's super dangerous to give to somebody who's not drugged out on opioids. But yeah, so detective work, you try and figure out whatever way you can, whether it's searching the room, talking with people who are there, checking their pockets. Maybe there's some kind of a suicide note, or they've got a pill bottle inside their pockets.
Right.
You got to be careful with that because they might have needles in their pockets.
Yeah.
You never know.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of detective work, even with non-overdose things, figuring out if someone's presenting with very generic signs and symptoms, I've got abdominal pain. They've just got generic pain around here in their abdomen, and that could be any number of causes. Plenty of them are life-threatening.
Really?
Yeah, sure. And so then you have to go through their medical history, their medications that they take, what they were doing when this happened. With women, any woman under the age of 40, even now, even you can get 40. You have to ask them, is there any chance that you're pregnant? Because a pregnant woman with abdominal pain is very bad.
Yeah.
You don't want that at all. So there's plenty of deadly things. If a pregnant woman's got abdominal pain, there's plenty of deadly things with that.
Your statement about the junkie being mad about taking out of the high, I've actually heard that they're trying to administer cures for addictions. Let's say you have a heroin addiction, they would give you, like, I'll just call it, for lack of a better word, anti-heroin, and it negates any benefit or feeling from heroin if you ever use it.
Yeah.
And so, like, even if you got your hands on heroin and started shooting up, like, it doesn't do anything to you.
Huh.
So they said that mixed with, therapy can stop people, but, like...
Interesting.
Yeah, that would be... Especially if you're, like, a lifelong junkie and then just, like, yeah, we're going to take away your ability to get high.
Yeah.
Hopefully it can change their life, but I feel like there'd be a lot of pissed off people.
Yeah, heroin addiction, you'll hear people talk about the opioid epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people addicted to opiates. It's not heroin, though. That's not what people are... people are addicted to heroin, but that's not the epidemic. The epidemic is prescription opiates.
Xanax, right? I heard that's worse than heroin.
Xanax is benzodiazepine. That's different type of medication.
Okay.
No, we're talking like hydrocodone.
Gotcha.
Codeine's an opiate.
Percocet?
Percocet? I'm not sure what Percocet is, but any type of, like, narcotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's the prescription pills that are causing the epidemic. It's not the street heroin that you'll see the guy shooting up in a back alleyway. It's the one that comes in the little orange bottle.
Yeah. Man. That's wild, dude. Do you have anything you want to speak on, I guess, about the biological and neurological side of your degree?
Neuroscience is really cool. It's extremely complicated. Even just learning about the basic cell of the nervous system, the neuron, that could take months. There's so much information behind what's going on inside those single cells compared to any other cell. Because they have the same, basic parts of every other cell. They've got a nucleus, they've got mitochondria, they've got membranes, but then they've got this whole signaling network that they form. And
is that the axon? And
yeah, the axon is part of the neuron. The axon's the long, tube. It's almost like the train track or the telephone wire that sends the signal. Yeah, the neuron's pretty cool.
Well, that looks like about 43 minutes.
It's not.
Yeah, I think that should give people enough to hold them over for another 18 months, right? No, well, we're definitely going to have to try and do this more.
Yeah.
Get some more people in.
Yeah, I could talk about medicine for days.
Yeah, man. I definitely need to do a little bit more research to kind of spark some more questions, but yeah, you seem very knowledgeable about a lot of the stuff, and you seem to be able to break it down layman-wise. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, where can these guys find you? Do you have like a Twitter or Instagram or anything? No? All right, well, don't contact Dillon then, people. All right. We'd like to thank our sponsor today. It's Molten Boron. Nobody does it like Molten Boron. And you too can have a gallon delivered for $10.99 a month. And again, we appreciate you for coming. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have a good one, and we'll see you soon.